you to introduce yourself, brief bio, where you're from originally, how'd you get to Portland, why do you want to be on the school board, what do you do for a living. We'll then have some questions for you. We are here for the benefit of our readers, so we'll tape this. The tape goes up when the endorsements come out. And so if we move you along or cut you off or redirect you, it's not because we're rude, it's just because we have a lot to do and want to make sure we get the information our readers need. So we will start at this end of the table. Josie, if you're ready, if you could tell us. Well, you're not ready because you're done.
How much time do you want that initial piece to be?
Couple of minutes. We'll cut you off if it goes too long. We'll start at this end of the table now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, so my name is Zach Babb. I'm from the Chicagoland area originally. I came out here to Portland in 2000 and to go to Reed. I was a religion major back then, and my parents decided that they didn't want to invest in that, so I left for 10 years. But I always wanted to come back to Portland and continue my education. I just really love the city, so I came back in 2010 after working for Starbucks and Apple for 10 years and studied physics. While back at Reed, I had the opportunity to meet with some entrepreneurs in Portland and got a chance to actually start Globe Sherpa here in town with Nat Parker and Michael Gray. If you don't know, we're the startup that made the TriMet Tickets app. And I was the primary mobile engineer for that endeavor. And so I've been working for them. We're now called Movil. We were acquired by Movil, which is a subsidiary of Daimler 2 years ago. And we've just been expanding and delivering on the transit experience around the country. So over the last couple of years, I've wanted to turn some of my attention to policy and politics. Education's been my number one issue, and so after reading about Tom Kohler stepping down, I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring for running for school board. And really what I want to do is bring my analytical focus and my sort of systems focus to education and trying to create the best education system that we can here in Portland.
Do you have any children?
I don't.
Go ahead. What kind of civic engagement have you had prior to this race?
This is
Starting here.
Starting here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you
Jumping right into the tough stuff.
That's it. That's right.
Did you graduate from Reed yet?
I did not. No.
There's still time.
Yeah, still time. I've dropped out of college twice.
Both times at Reed.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, Julia?
Great. So I'm Julia Broom-Edwards, and I'm from Portland. I'm a proud graduate of Portland Public Schools. I attended Glencoe Elementary. It was K-8 at the time. I graduated from Monroe High School. Was Washington High School until my junior year, and then merged with Monroe. For the past 18 years, I've been a parent activist in Portland Public Schools, and so I think I've done sort of the whole range of things, whether it was going on field trips, serving on site councils, done just about classroom volunteer, anything you can imagine at a school-based level. But I've also been a leader at the sort of district-wide level or city-wide level. I was on the school board from 2001 to 2005 during a very difficult time period. And I think and I just sort of summarize sort of my parent experience. I've really been a leader for 20 years, both inside the district, so sort of inside the belly of the beast, and I think been a strong, effective leader inside, but I've also played a role, actually for the majority of the time, as sort of an outside parent activist, pushing the district, I think, to do the right thing related to students. And I think the question that often has come up in the last 3 weeks is like, why are you running again? And I think even though I got into the race about 3 weeks ago, I would sort of attribute it back to 2012 when my youngest was a high school student, and the district made a decision to effectively shorten the school year or the school day for high school students. And for 83% of the high school students in Portland, they were going to have a mandated shortened school day, late arrival, early dismissal, study halls with 200 kids and no instruction happening. And that was a catalyst for me to sort of get back involved deeply into school issues, and I organized a citywide coalition. We spent 2.5 years basically fighting the district. And what I came out of that feeling was this was just one example of the district not having strong, effective, accountable leadership either on the school board or in the superintendent's office. And so I've fully re-engaged since then and really tried to push the board to sort of deliver on its role in the system, which is you're accountable to the community, you need to be transparent, you need to be united behind a vision, and be able to be delivering a budget and aligning the resources against the district's mission, and I don't think they've done that. So I thought that running for the board would allow me an opportunity to help Portland when I think they're at a sort of a big fork in the road, either continuing to like a long, slow deterioration or fulfilling its promise to our students in our community. And I do think that I'm optimistic that we can get back on the other path. Otherwise, I wouldn't have run. I think I'll bring some expertise and skills and experience and relationships to, and also a track record of having changed the board in the past.
Why did you not run for a second term in 2004?
So in 2000, so it was 4 years, but in dog years. It actually was much longer. So if you weren't here at the time, when I got on the board was very dysfunctional. There was an interim superintendent. We, in the next year, the country went into a deep recession. We were facing 5 years from cutting 5 weeks off the school year, closing a whole host of schools, needing to get cost containment in every labor union agreement, recruiting a new superintendent. So I spent 4 years, and when my term was up, and thinking about should I run again. My kids were all young and in elementary school, and I felt like I had helped turn the ship around. But by the time I left the board, we had a strong, united board that didn't always agree, but certainly respected each other and worked well together. We had a new superintendent. We had passed a local income tax, so we had stable funding. We'd created a reserve policy that basically has helped PPS over the last 15 years ride out some of the bumps. It would have been much worse. We also brought a lot of accountability to the central office and transparency. So we implemented an internal auditor, and we got rid of the golden parachutes that they'd been offering all the senior administrators. So I felt like I had done a lot of work, and if your measurement, and really change the course of the district back to a much better path, and if you stayed till the work was done, you'll never leave the school board. So I felt we recruited new school board members. They were working well together. It was time to hand off the baton.
Okay.
And
great, Joseph.
Hi. I am going to be dealing with a still young and rambunctious, yet quiet and good puppy dog. My name is Josie Simonis. I use they, them pronouns. I will be on the ballot as Joseph Simonis. That's my legal name, but pretty much everybody refers to me as Josie. I am a career scientist. I have a PhD in ecology from Cornell University. I most recently, before being in Portland, was in Chicago working as a scientist, and then moved out here in 2015 to take a job with a fisheries consulting company in Gresham. I have trained and have expertise in academic and educational and nonprofit governance through my time at Cornell, my time at Lincoln Park Zoo, where I was a postdoc, and before then. I am currently now a small business owner. I have started my own statistical data science company that basically allows me to structure my time as I see fit. And I'm more or less modeling my time after a faculty member, like an R1 faculty member, because that's what I was trained to do. And so that involves research, teaching, mentorship, advocacy, outreach, and administrative work. And so I recently had sort of set myself up well enough with my position to be able to engage more and figure out where best to put my energy and my training and expertise in administration. I know not everybody has an interest or a desire to be in governance or to be involved in governance, but everybody has a stake in it. And I know that my training has the potential to create really positive change, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So it was in that context that a friend of mine who I play roller derby with, who is a parent and a grandparent of PPS students, and reached out because Tom was stepping down. Nobody had put in their name yet, and said, we need someone from Zone 6. And I was like, oh, hey, that's me. Oh, hey, I have this experience. Oh, looking at PPS, looking at the situation of public institutions in Portland, there's a lot of inequities that still exist. There's a lot of opportunity for me to do really good positive change and to leverage the skill set that I have to actually get some positive work done. And so that's kind of the context and why I stepped into to this race as a candidate. And what I'm really, the platform that I'm really running on is equity and accountability. And I say those two words together because Portland and PPS specifically have really good, laudable ideas about what equity looks like and what accountability look like. But in terms of our educational system, it's not playing out. We're still seeing massive racial disparities, massive disparities based on whether students have special needs or not, or their economic backgrounds, and that means that the district has a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that they're actually holding themselves accountable to their ideas of educational equity. And so that's sort of the context and the background for my candidacy and what I'm hoping to really kind of focus on.
Okay, great, thanks. So Julia, you concluded your remarks by saying you could stay on the board forever because the work is never done. You know, we've seen lots of reporting over the past few years that compares Portland's results in things like, you know, attendance, graduation rates, all sorts of metrics where other districts that are almost as large, like Beaverton or Salem, do better than Portland, even though they, certainly in Salem's case, have a even lower SES than our district. So big picture, what's wrong with this district?
That's right. Well, those districts also, in some cases, have a lot less money than PPS.
Right.
So I want to take away the issue of we don't have enough money as a reason why we're not performing at the level we should be performing. And I think there's the difference is in some of those other districts that do better with similar students, or maybe even students with a more diverse background and less money, is because they have some key things in place. I think that most of them have had either, strong accountable leadership in the superintendent's office. I mean, a great example, PPS should go be learning from North Clackamas District, the National Superintendent of the Year. They're with a really strong central office team. So you have strong accountable leadership that's transparent. In addition, all those districts, so I think one thing that is that you'll find is they have systems, and Portland, we have sort of pockets of excellence, but there's not a system in which that our students get a consistent level of support. So the fact that I would be very surprised if other school districts had the level of inequality in the course offerings amongst their high schools or their middle schools or their middle grades. And I think one of the chief jobs to get Portland performing better is to have a set of systems in which no matter where you're in school, that you're getting students in school, that they have access to a similar rigorous and relevant curriculum, that teachers and principals are getting professional development, coaching, mentoring. So there's not this, it really depends on how well you're going to do or the school's going to do based on, who your principal is or the classroom teacher you happen to get, or, what the parent community happened to do. So I think a lack of systems, a lack of leadership, and frankly, I'm going to just sort of fingered the school board in the sense of they have not provided, their role of is to oversee the superintendent and hold the superintendent and the superintendent's direct reports accountable. And that hasn't been the case. The board got out of its sort of role that it's supposed to have and got to be more of a cheerleader for the superintendent. And I think in other districts that's not the case.
Over what period of time are you talking that they've been cheerleading for the superintendent?
Well,
do you see?
at
do you
least
feel like there's been a change in the last 2 years? Or
I think there has been some change, but not enough. And so one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about the district's future is I think there'll be three new community leaders who will allow the board to reset how it does its work. Because sometimes you can have good, accountable members of the board, but if you don't have 4 of them, it's awfully hard. Like one person cannot change.
We saw an election in the last cycle, an election that was essentially a referendum on Carol Smith. And the people who were most critical of Superintendent Smith won, and then they didn't do anything. So there's often this sense around election times, we need to do what you just said, hold the board more accountable, hold the superintendent more accountable, instill more rigor, look at systems, try and adopt best practices from other districts. Then it doesn't happen. And in part it seems as if there's a sort of regulatory capture that happens. You go in as a board member, whichever one of you wins, and all of a sudden all your information is coming from staff and the superintendent, and they tell you everything's great.
Well, I can tell you as a board member that will not happen, and that's not how I was when I was on the board before. That's not at all what I did. What I tried to do is get out in the schools, listen to people who actually had real information, so parents, teachers, school secretaries, the people who really know what's happening on the ground. And I think the way, and I always view with a critical eye the information you get from the central office. And I don't want to say that people in the central office have bad intentions or don't care about our students. But I think it's super important to be listening to the community. That's a key role of a board member. And I can just say my track record from before, there's nothing to indicate that that's what I would do when I got on the board. In fact, I'm sure there's some people who are worried about me getting on the board because they know what my track record was before and how I've engaged as a parent leader and an activist on the outside, which is really hold people accountable. Even if there were people I supported when they ran or...
Yep.
Julie, what do you feel like the interim superintendent has accomplished in this transition year?
So, essentially, keeping schools open, and I think he's done some things structurally, internally, and that more on the operational side, which I think has been important. A couple things that, if you looked back a year and a half ago, I think people would have said facilities and the operation side of the district wasn't very transparent or accountable. Certainly all the things that had happened with the lead in the water and sort of the health and safety issues, that Carol wasn't providing any sort of direction or oversight or clear guidance or leadership. And I think Bob has delegated wisely and given Yusuf and Courtney and the team there the authority and support to sort of get things running on the facility side of things. And he's also making some changes on the instructional side. So from an organizational structure, having 3 assistant superintendents didn't make any sense. So I think he's moving in the right direction on that side. And I think hopefully he'll hand the district off to the new superintendent in a way in which the new superintendent is not left with a whole host of problems. But that means he still has some work to do.
So, Zach, you've listened to somebody who's been part of the district as a parent and a board member for a long time. She brings a lot of knowledge. So why would you be a better choice for voters than Julie?
So I think, and I want to just say that everything Julia just said is a lot of it is on target, and it's what I've been wanting to hear from school board candidates that I haven't necessarily heard thus far. But I do think it's still too low of a bar and too small of a vision. You bring up the example of other school districts in Oregon. Well, Oregon's a pretty poor performing state, and we do have districts that perform better than PPS. But even setting our sights towards meeting, those other districts and being a little bit above average, I don't think that's a high enough goal in order for PPS to set for itself. And instead, that if we wanted to really, drive home the importance of education and the importance of what education can provide, we should be shooting to be above the national average and exceeding the national average. And to me, that really is the fundamental issue with equity too, right? Is if we're looking at our educational system in order to provide everybody, regardless of race, color, creed, with the advantages that they need in order to excel in the real world, then simply setting our target as, hey, you can get the same mediocre education that everybody else is getting, is just too narrow and too small of a focus. So what I really want to do is change the tenor of the school board and the way Portland views itself and like what it can envision its school system to be, to really try and take it to that next level where we're not just better than average in Oregon, but we're leading the nation in an educational system.
Okay, thanks. Josie, same question for you. Obviously, Julie is the more experienced candidate in this of the three of you, so why would you be a better choice for voters?
Totally, and I think that's always a decision to make, the experienced within the local context versus fresh eyes. And I think it's really important. You said that she's more experienced. I would definitely say more experienced here. I have worked with a variety of groups, have extensive experience and training in governance structures and advocating on behalf of underserved and underrepresented or not represented constituents on a small board. I have oodles of experience, but I'm new and fresh to PPS in Portland. And I think that's a really critical and important thing to highlight, is that folks that come in with experience elsewhere, but good training and good knowledge and good capacity, can provide fresh perspective, new ideas on how to approach existing systemic issues. And the reality of the situation is exactly what Zach just said. Yes, Portland Public is doing a better job and has been doing a better job, but we are still at Oregon State average for graduation rates, for example, and that's the 4th lowest in the country, right? So like that's a really low bar, and we need to work specifically to leverage new ideas and the new capital, and the new intellectual capital that's moving into Portland to help build a school district that will actually be able to make us the body that is educating the populace here, so that they can take hold of that creative capital and human capital that exists here in Portland. And I feel like there's a gross disservice that's been happening and historically has been happening. And so fresh perspective and fresh eyes, I think, can be a huge benefit with the systemic historic inequities that have existed in Portland specifically, and in PPS specifically.
Okay.
So can I respond?
Sure.
So I guess I want to add that, because it could be portrayed, I live in the house I grew up in. I live down the street from where I went to elementary school. I've been involved in Portland schools for a long time, but I get up every day, and my job in my other life is I work for a global company that has to get up in a very competitive industry, has to get up every day and go do the work, deliver results. And I think what I would say is that I have a broader vision. I know what students need to be, which is part of my urgency. I know what students need to be successful in our future economy. And I think the experience that I've had both at Nike and also living outside of Portland is understanding that there's a lot of wisdom other places. So it's not just here in Portland. We can tap wisdom from other places, and that I've been exposed to that. So I haven't been here all my life. But most importantly, I might get up and be on a call with our team in Brussels in the day with talking to people in China, in Singapore, in Vietnam. And so I understand what my kids, and there 3 of them are heading into the workforce, 2 of them are already, but what they need in order to be successful. And so I think I have an understanding of what the high standards are, not just we need to be better than Salem or better than Newburgh.
So we've seen people like John Kitzhaber and Charlie Hales get a chance to serve over again, essentially so maybe they're bad examples, but they got to come back and do something that they had done before, serve in a similar capacity, and they had mixed results, but they did, they brought back experience. So you've been away from the board, you've been involved, but you've been away from the board for a decade, more or less. So what will you do differently this time? How will you be a different board member because of what you learned last time and what you've learned in the intervening years?
So I think I'm a lot wiser, and that wisdom comes from I've had, when I was on the board before, I had 2 kids in elementary school and 1 who was on his way. And I've now been through the system, and I've been on the receiving end of PPS saying, we don't, dismissing parents and dismissing me of like, your issues aren't legitimate. We don't need to provide you with that information, playing us against other parent communities. And so I think I have a few battle scars. And in fact, I have a real scar from PPS from my high school advocacy days. But so I think what I'll bring is more wisdom. I have an understanding now of like what kids need in middle school. I think my 3 kids are all very different, and I have a lot of friends whose kids have different needs. And I've now been a 3-time high school parent, and in high schools on the east and the west side of the district. So I've seen disparities. I've had my kids in a Title I school. So I think I think I'll be a stronger board member. I think I was an effective board member and helped turn the district around last time, but I didn't know, when you have children in elementary school, you don't know what you don't know. Right. So I think I've learned a lot more.
So what's the one thing, if you were to be elected, all 3 of you will work on a variety of things, but I'd like to ask you each, what is the one thing that you would like to focus on if
Or
elected?
first priority or top priority.
First and top priority. I'll let you take a crack at that first, Joseph.
Yeah, so my, like I said before, my overarching campaign is for equity and accountability and actually delivering on what we say we want in terms of equity. And I think a really important thing, to a point that was brought before, access to equal opportunities is not necessarily equity. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that equitability requires a resource distribution that isn't necessarily equal and is counter to the way that it exists right now. And so what I would like to do very early on is set ground rules and basic practices and work to set those collaboratively within the school board, such that any policy statement that is made comes with direct actionable items and benchmarks associated with them, and specifically associated, I would like to see a racial equity and accountability specifically addressed in a way that is more encompassing than 7 or 8% of the budget. I would like it to involve, that discussion to involve a wide variety of folks within the district, a wide variety of constituents, and actually work to figure out how best to address, again, the systemic and historic inequities with regards to opportunities and success of students of different racial backgrounds within our district.
Okay. Zach, how about you, top priority?
It's revenue. And Julia said that she wants to dispel the notion that we don't have enough money, but we don't have enough money. To give an example, one of the things that causes our current situation is we got rid of most of our curriculum department 6 or 7 years ago. And there's no money, there's no additional funds in order to put that back in place. And so now our high school students continue to suffer with inadequate credits in order to graduate. It's like we're a household and we threw out our pots and pans. And now we're wondering like why we can't cook food anymore. And so we need to address the way PPS is funded, because Oregon, the state, doesn't tax or fund its educational system appropriately. And what I mean by that is